High in the green mountains of Peru, hidden for centuries by jungle and mist, there is a stone that should not be possible. It is known as the White Rock. A massive boulder of solid granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth. And someone, long ago, carved into its face with impossible care. Flat plains, as smooth as a tabletop, recessed steps, and razor-sharp inner corners, cut so cleanly they look like they belong on a machine, not on a mountain. The textbooks tell us the Inca made this, using little more than bronze tools and patience. But there is a problem, because when mainstream archaeologists finally excavated this shrine, they found something so strange that to this day, the laboratories that measured it cannot fully explain it. It was not the great stone. It was not the temple. It was a single, fragile piece of grass rope. When the carbon dating came back from the lab, the results were undeniable. That rope was older than the Inca themselves. Tonight, we are going to follow that one impossible thread and ask the question it leaves behind. If the Inca did not first carve this stone, then who did? Now, I want you to stay with me because this is not a wild guess or a fairy tale. Everything we are about to look at comes from a real excavation. From real scientists working at one of the most respected laboratories in the world. People firmly inside mainstream history, not dreamers, not treasure hunters. They went up that mountain to answer two simple questions. When was this shrine built? And when did it die? They expected ordinary answers. What they found instead was three quiet clues that did not fit. A rope that is too old. Floors that were laid, abandoned, and then laid all over again. And cuts in the stone too sharp and too deeply worn by time for the story we have all been taught. Take any one of these on its own, and you can wave it away. But put all three together, and the picture begins. So get comfortable. Because by the end of this, you may never look at the official story of Peru the same way again. First, let us set the scene. Deep in the Vilcabamba region of Peru, far from the famous tourist trails, there is a sacred site the Inca called Yurac Rumi, which simply means the White Rock. It was a holy place, a shrine where priests once came to speak to the spirits, beside a cold spring that still rises from the ground today. And the official story of who built it is a reasonable one. Let me give it to you fairly, because it deserves that. The Inca Empire rose to power in these mountains in the 1400s. And make no mistake, they were extraordinary builders. They cut terraces into impossible slopes. They built roads that ran for thousands of miles. They raised cities that still stand today. To call them primitive would be an insult to the truth. When it comes to a hard stone like granite, historians say the Inca used a clever method. They did not cut it with soft bronze. Bronze is far too weak for that. Instead, they used harder hammer stones to bruise and chip the surface. Grain, then, they ground it smooth with sand, water, and an almost unimaginable patience. Given enough years, that method really can produce a beautiful, flat face. So the official story is simple. The Inca found this granite boulder. The Inca carved it. The Inca worshipped here. End of story. For a long time, that was enough. Then, in the year 2008, a team of archaeologists climbed up to study the stone properly, and the ground itself began to tell a much longer story. Let us begin with the rope, because the rope is the thing that makes no sense at all. The team was led by respected scholars, working with a top radiocarbon laboratory in Arizona, one of the most trusted in the world. They gathered 11 separate samples from the shrine and sent every one off to be dated. Now, we already knew how this place ended. In the year 1570, Spanish missionaries arrived, piled firewood around the sacred buildings, and burned them to the ground. The roofs collapsed and were sealed into the earth, charred black, and from that fallen roof, the team recovered the old timbers, the bamboo poles, and the grass thatch. They tested all of it. And nearly everything behaved exactly as it. The wood, the bamboo, the thatch, they all clustered together in the late 1400s and early 1500s. Precisely the years the Inca are said to have lived and worshipped here. 10 of the 11 samples lined up into one clean, tidy story. The science and the textbook stood in quiet agreement. And then, there was the rope. Among the roofing remains lay a single length of cord, woven from local mountain grass, used to tie the rafters together. By every reasonable expectation, it should have matched the wood it was lashed to. Instead, it came back with a date of around the late 1200s, more than 200 years older than the roof it was holding up. Now let me make that feel real for you. Imagine you build a brand new house this year. Scientists come to test it. They measure the timber brand new. They measure the roof brand new. And then they measure the rope holding it all together, and that rope was made 200 years before you were born. You wouldn't believe it. You'd assume somebody made a mistake. But this is grass rope. It is fragile. It rots. A working cord, doing the humble job of holding up a roof, is just about the last thing on earth you would expect anyone to treasure and reuse across 2 centuries. The scientists looked for the easy answer: contamination, older carbon seeping in and making it read falsely old. But they closed that door themselves. The sample was lifted straight from the ground and sent to the lab with no chemicals applied. And so, in the careful language of a scientific report, they admitted the one thing that should make all of us lean a little closer to the screen. They could not fully explain it. 200 years is not a rounding error. It is a gap wide enough to hold an entire forgotten chapter of history. And it leaves us with a question the report never answers. If this single thread of grass is older than the Inca themselves, then what was it binding together, and for whom, in the long years before the Inca ever arrived? Now, one strange number, standing alone, can always be set aside. One odd result out of 11, a fluke, a glitch in the lab. If that rope were the only thing out of place, we could shrug and move on. But the rope does not stand alone. When the same team dug down through the floor of the shrine, the earth gave them their second clue. Because they did not find one floor, they found 2 floors, stacked one directly on top of the other, each one made of finely crushed white granite, and between them a quiet layer of dark earth. Think about what that dark layer is. It is time. It is the slow settling of years between one floor and the next. That is not how a place is built in a single season by a single generation. That is how a place is built, used, buried, and then built again, across a long stretch of years. And the crushed white granite is a clue all by itself. That brilliant white powder is the dust of carving the chips knocked loose as the great stone was shaped. To lay 2 separate floors of that dust is, in effect, to say the stone was carved in 2 different eras. Worked once, then returned to, and worked again with enough time in between to leave that dark seam of earth lying quietly in the middle. And here is what makes this site so rare. Unlike almost every other great shrine in the Andes, Yurac Rumi was never rebuilt for tourists. It was barely touched by looters. The jungle simply swallowed it and kept it safe. So what those scientists found in the soil was the honest, undisturbed memory of the place itself, layer resting on layer, exactly as time had set them down. Now, the mainstream has a calm answer for this, and it is a fair one. The Inca, they say, simply reused something they believed was holy. They folded older material into their shrine because the rock was far too sacred to throw away. But listen closely to what that gentle answer quietly admits. To reuse an older object is to admit there was an older object. To inherit a sacred stone is to admit that somebody, long before the Inca, had already made it sacred. So now we have 2 clues, not one, and they both point in the same direction. A rope older than the empire that tied it into and a floor that was laid, abandoned, and laid again across more years than a single lifetime can hold. And there is still a third clue waiting for us, carved into the face of the stone itself. Stand in front of the white rock, and the first thing that strikes you is not its size, it is its geometry. Across the gray face of that boulder run flat planes, cut so cleanly they look like a technical drawing. There are recessed steps. There are sharp inner corners. There is even a row of square blocks left standing in relief, while the rock all around them was carved away. Now, remember what the official story told us. The Inca ground this stone smooth with sand, water, and patience. And here is the thing that explanation genuinely does work for a flat surface. Grind long enough, and you will get a beautiful flat plane. I want to be honest about that. But grinding with sand and stone does not so easily explain a sharp inner, the place where two cut surfaces meet at a clean square right angle, with no rounding, no soft curve, no gentle margin where the polishing simply ran out of room. It does not easily explain edges that look ruled rather than rubbed. This is the detail that independent researchers keep coming back to. To their eye, both the sharpness of these cuts and the depth of the weathering the wear that time itself has carved into the worked surfaces run further than 5 centuries of Inca presence can comfortably account for. Now, I have to be fair here, in a single breath. This is the human eye reading a stone, not a machine measuring it. And the eye can be fooled by what it hopes to find. We hold that caution honestly. But the researchers are not pointing at this one boulder alone. They are pointing at a pattern that repeats all across the Andes. At Sacsayhuaman, above the city of Cusco. At Ollantaytambo, across the valley. Again and again, you find the same strange arrangement. The finest, smoothest, most deeply weathered stonework sits at the very bottom, and the cruder, rougher work, the work everyone agrees, is Inca sits on top of it. The oldest work is the best work. The later work is the rougher work. And that is the wrong way around for a story of steady progress. Civilizations are supposed to get better over time, not worse. So why, at site after site, does the most masterful stone lie underneath, as if the Inca arrived to find it already there and simply built upon it? That brings us to the third clue, sitting right here at the white rock. The same impossibly sharp geometry, the same deep weathering, quietly waiting beneath the additions of a later age. 3 clues now: a rope that is too old, floors that are too many, and cuts that are too sharp and too deeply worn for the time the textbook will allow. Each one, alone, invites an easy answer. All 3 together invite a very different question. So let me say plainly the answer that fits all 3 of these clues while asking us to ignore the fewest. It is this: that the white rock was already ancient and already holy long before the Inca ever climbed up into this hidden valley. That an older people whose name and whose story we have lost first chose this stone above its cold spring. First cut into its hard gray face, first made it a place of worship and of awe, and that the Inca, arriving at last in the 1400s, did not truly build Yurac Rumi at all. They inherited it. They were not its first architects. They were its last and most famous, worshippers, adding their own carvings and their own buildings to a shrine that was already old when their empire was still young. And suddenly, the strange details stop being strange. The weathering runs deep because the carving really is old. The floors stack in layers because the place was held sacred across many ages of men. And that fragile, impossible rope finally makes a kind of sense, a surviving thread from an earlier people, gathered up and woven into a roof by hands that came long after them. Which leaves the obvious question: if not the Inca, then who? And here, we are not just guessing into the dark, because the Andes were never short of master builders before the Inca. Long before Cusco rose to power, the people of Tiwanaku, on the high plain near Lake Titicaca, were cutting and fitting hard volcanic stone with a precision that still stops modern engineers in their tracks. Beside them, and after them, A people called the Wari spread a sophisticated stone building tradition across these highlands. Both of these civilizations flourished and then faded more than 1,000 years ago. Centuries before the Inca were ever a power in these mountains. So, we are not conjuring master masons out of thin air. We know, for a fact, that the Andes held them, age after age, long before the empire our textbooks so confidently credit. And that lonely rope, dated to the late 1200s, sits in a gap all its own. Too late for the great age of Tiwanaku, too early for the Inca, as if it is pointing towards some quieter people who lived and worked in the long years between the giants. Now, I have to be honest with you. The way the scientists were honest, this is a hypothesis, not a proven fact. The contamination of the rope cannot be ruled out with total certainty. The eye that reads too much into a cut can still be fooled. But at the center of all of it sits one fact that no objection has yet dissolved: a rope at the heart of an Inca shrine, carrying inside it a date older than the Inca themselves, unexplained to this very day by the very scientists who measured it.